Welcome to the Joy School Podcast. Real talk about what it takes to create your happiest, healthiest, and most dynamic life. And now, here's your host, transformational life coach, happiness strategist, and best-selling author, Kristi Ling Spencer.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the show. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I truly appreciate it. I was just looking, every now and then I get a report that just tells me the places around the world that people are listening from. And the most recent one I looked at, I was so blown away because it's like we have listeners from Greece, the Caribbean, Mexico, Australia, the UK, and of course, all over the US, Canada. It's just amazing to me. And I want to say hello to everybody listening and thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. And I'm so touched that we have this global community together with this podcast and of course with all my other offerings on my website and my classes and courses. It really brings me so much joy. So thank you all so much for being a part of that. And it is quite a rainy day here where I am in Houston. It is thundering and pouring outside. So if you hear some thunder in the background, that's what that is. We've been having quite a lot of crazy weather this year. We recently had Hurricane Beryl, which you may have seen on the news, and that did affect my area quite a bit. In fact, we were hit very hard. We live on the water on the bay right outside of Houston, and we had almost a week without power. And it was not only a week without power, it was like crazy heat and humidity, like 93% humidity and 105 heat index. It was a rough week, to say the least. But I will say one of the best things about situations like that is watching people come together. It was pretty cool to see neighbors helping neighbors, neighbors with generators, letting other neighbors plug their refrigerators in so that they wouldn't lose all their food. And we literally went and camped out at a neighbor's house who had their AC running just enough to keep things so that it wasn't miserable. And we, along with some other neighbors, went and slept at a neighbor's house for a few nights because our house was just way, way too hot and humid to even sleep in. It would have been unbearable. So we were so grateful for that. But I'll tell you what, after a few days, I was done with the glamping and I was ready for the power to come back on, which it did. And, you know, nothing like that kind of a situation to remind you to be just so grateful for all of the little things that we don't really think about every day, right? So true. So today we're going to talk about opting out of toxic talk. And I really thought this was an important topic to discuss on the show with the recent news about President Biden deciding not to seek re-election and all that's going to go with that over the next few months, as well as everything that's happening around the world. And just also, this seems to be a challenging year for so many people, whether it's unexpected things happening in our lives, dealing with big changes, whatever it may be. It just seems to be such a when it rains, it pours type of year for many people. And so with that, sometimes comes a lot of different types of toxic talk, as well as toxic and negative energies around, right? Especially on social media. But definitely within families and sometimes even within our friend groups, right? Especially when things are this volatile. So I wanted to just share some things with you all and give you some tools to help you in these situations to stay a little more even, a little more grounded, to recenter a bit when you feel triggered or when you feel like you're going to get sucked into a negative conversation that you know is not going to go anywhere good, right? Although sometimes, you know, we all have our opinions about things and we all have things that we're passionate about. And sometimes it's very tempting to engage in those conversations. But learning to just pause when we're tempted to comment, whether it's in person or comment on social media, learning to just pause and ask ourselves, is this going to lead to anything good? You know, is this going to result in a positive change or a positive conversation, or is this likely to bring more toxic negativity, right? Usually the answer is pretty clear. And then it's really easy not to just jump in without thinking. It's much easier to just take a step back then when we're able to just catch ourselves and pause and then move on with our life, right? Like I posted something recently on Threads that seemed to really hit. And so I'm going to read you this quote because it really comes into play here. And that is, it's perfectly okay and even good for your health to say out loud or to yourself, I'm not participating in this conversation. Choosing peace and lightness is powerful self-care. And wow, yeah, people really reacted to that one because it's so true. And it is within our right and our, areas of boundaries, right? Creating boundaries is part of what this is about. To just think to ourselves or even say out loud if people are aggressively trying to engage us in some of this stuff, to just say, I'm not participating in this conversation, but thank you. And you don't have to engage. And learning to just pause and think to yourself, is this really something I want to engage in? Is such a healthy habit. And by the way, this includes talk with yourself. If you catch yourself in the midst of a storm of negative self talk or unnecessary complaining or pointless negative thoughts that you know are not serving you, and that's not to say, don't ever have negative thoughts. Of course, it's natural to have some thoughts that are negative, and, I'm not immune to this, but learning to catch ourselves and then actually examining to say, is this productive? Is there a real reason for this? And if there is, what's my next action step to create change around what this thing is that I'm feeling negative about or complaining about, right? Or to be able to just say, yeah, there is absolutely no point to this negative self-talk right now or these negative thoughts, and switching gears and just saying, hey, I'm not participating in this, and going, hey, brain, it's time to choose new thoughts, right? We can kind of laugh at ourselves a little bit and realize that sometimes there's a little bit of silliness there. And, that being said, I also want to validate you and myself, because like I said, we're human beings. We're going to be prone sometimes to have a negative thought or angry thoughts or whatever. And some of those are valid. So it really is just about taking a step back, noticing them consciously, and then examining, is this going to serve me? Is this negative? Do I want to participate in this? And if your inner voice tells you, yeah, this is a valid thing that you're frustrated with right now, then question and say, okay, well, what's my action step to find some resolution here, right? Because if we just allow the negative thoughts and negative self-talk or whatever it is to keep going, and we don't take an action step to resolve whatever the thing is that's bringing those to the surface, they're just going to keep lingering, right? And so this serves us in a number of ways. We can either realize that we're being a little silly and we can choose new thoughts, or we can say, you know what, this is actually valid and I want to bring this concern to my forefront and really tackle it, right? So as I mentioned before, with the toxic energies that go around on social media and the current climate of just everything happening in the world, and of course, the things happening in all of our lives, there's so much going on. It really, really serves us to look at these things strongly. And, one thing to think about too is, of course, we should be expressing ourselves. And I personally love to have spirited debates with friends who don't necessarily see things the same way I do, but those friends who are respectful and who I actually enjoy having these conversations with. I respect that their views might be different, and they know how to have a conversation respectfully and with love with somebody who doesn't see things the same way. And sometimes we might get a little change in perspective out of that. Those are the friends, and we all know who they are, who I love to engage with on these things. And I think it's very healthy. But at the same time, we all have people in our lives that get really aggressive about their opinions. And if you don't see things the same way they do, well, then you're just wrong. And, they get that way. And this is both in person and on social. And these are the areas where it might be great to create a little distance or to use that line, I'm not participating in this conversation, right? And really avoid getting sucked in with those people who are like brick walls, who are going to make you wrong no matter what, and who are committed to misunderstanding you, right? And so think about that, and maybe even put some thought into who the people are in your lives that you can go to and feel safe with to have some of these conversations about what's happening in the world or what might be going on in your life or sensitive subjects. And, identify those people in your life that you kind of want to just stick to the small talk or the subjects that you have in common, right? Being aware of those things can be super helpful. And so I would say that is really number one, is just to say, I opt out of this. I'm not going to participate in this conversation. And there are a couple of other things you can do to keep things positive, stay on track, or just generally avoid getting sucked into negative things that don't make you feel good. We've all had those exchanges on social media where either someone we know or a friend or just some random stranger criticizes or attacks or tries to make you wrong. And it's just a whole load of ick, right? And we don't feel good about it. And it just sucks, to be honest. And so, avoiding that more by being more highly aware of not getting sucked into it and just continue scrolling. So I would say that is a skill. When you see things on social media or online, blogs or whatever that you're tempted to comment on, just keep scrolling and move on with your life. And then smile at the fact that you kept on scrolling and moved on with your life, right? Because choosing peace over negativity, choosing peace over politics, choosing peace over having to have some random strangers or people you don't know very well know what your opinion is or thoughts are on a current event or whatever is so powerful. Choosing peace, right? And of course, there are some times when it is important to speak up. And there are some times and some subjects that are very important that you might feel very passionate about. And it's really just about being very intentional and mindful about where you express those thoughts and feelings and opinions, rather than just kind of throwing them all against the wall like spaghetti, right? And then getting sucked into a whole bunch of ick. So I would say, number one tip, you can absolutely say, I'm not participating in this conversation. Number two tip, keep scrolling. And I would say the final tip is really just walk away. And, as I mentioned earlier, there are some people who, no matter how gracefully you say something or kindly or lovingly, or how nicely you express yourself, they're going to keep trying to suck you in and make you wrong. And they're going to be aggressive, right? I have people like this in my life. And you know what? Sometimes it doesn't work to change the subject. Sometimes it does. Sometimes you can just try to change a subject. But if that doesn't work, you just sometimes need to excuse yourself and walk away. And there is power in that too. Sometimes walking away is the same as choosing peace. So keep scrolling, say out loud, I'm not participating in this, or just simply walk away if changing the subject doesn't work. These are all very powerful ways to stay in your peace and to stay grounded and on track with what your values are, right? We all have our values. And the other thing I'll say is that because this is such a volatile year around the world with so many things happening, is try not to be that person who is aggressive with their opinions and makes other people wrong. And, we all can be guilty of a little bit of this now and then because we might feel so passionate about a topic, and learning to catch ourselves and kind of shift that energy and being a little more open, or at least just respectful, or just say, hey, this isn't a conversation that's going to make me feel good, so I'd rather talk about something else. Just being open and direct and respectful of others is also a really healthy habit. If you know yourself and you have a hot button side and you tend to get fired up, try to be a little more mindful about that, because not only will you bring more peace and positivity to the people around you in your life who you care about, you'll bring it to yourself as well. So really being not only mindful of the behaviors and the habits of others when it comes to these things, being mindful of ourselves and checking ourselves, right? Like that old cliche, check yourself before you wreck yourself. But it's kind of true, especially with all that's going on. So this is all just food for thought. And I also really think that we all need to step up our self-love this year, our self-care, choosing peace, grounding. This past year, I personally, and I've mentioned this on the show before, have been getting more and more into forest bathing, it's a Japanese art. That's where it originated, of not just walking through the forest and thinking, oh, aren't the trees pretty? Isn't this relaxing? But actually doing it with intention for the purpose of healing and bringing peace to the heart and soul and body and calming the nervous system. And there's actually little meditations you can do. There's things that you can do walking through the woods or the forest or even the park to take your mind off of everything and just connect with nature very intentionally. And studies have shown how powerful this is for our mental health and for your nervous system and for calming anxiety. So this is one thing, just connecting with nature. If you don't have a forest near you, go to a park with a lot of trees. There are YouTube channels that just have ambient hiking. If you just search ambient hiking videos on YouTube, There are some beautiful creators that have just gone walking through the woods. And you can watch these videos or put them on in the background, and it gives you some similar benefits, just recognizing the trees and hearing the sounds, right? Such a beautiful thing. I actually envision videos like this being played on hospital televisions and in senior facilities and things like that. I think it would be so healing. And I personally myself am going to dive even deeper into the science of this and maybe even create some more offerings around it because I believe it is that powerful. Just our connection with nature and trees and all things nature and what it can do for our mental and physical health and our longevity. I really believe it's all connected. So that's one of the things you can do. Another thing you can do in the area of stepping up your self-care and choosing peace more often this year is amp up your morning habits to support you throughout the day. And I've talked about this on the show before, and I do talk about this in my classes. And there's a whole section on it in my book, Operation Happiness, and in the audiobook that covers in detail, how to make over your mornings to support your whole day and your life. And I say this over and over again because it's true. The way we live our mornings is the way we will live our day. And the way we live our days is the way we will experience our life. And mornings is where it all begins. So put some extra thought into these areas. And I know that tuning into the show means you're already thinking about these things, but I think this is a time in history and in our lives right now when it's time for a little glow up and a little upgrade around all these areas, right? All right. So that brings us to the section of the show called Joy School Habits. And this is where I share small habits that can have big impact. And I'm a big fan of those. And when we can stack a whole bunch of small positive habits that all have big positive impacts on our life and on our health and on our happiness, life it just glows. It becomes like next level when we start stacking these habits. So today's Joy School habit is to glow up your oral health to protect your brain. So this is a relatively new area of science, but in the last few years, there are a number of studies that show that, first of all, we've all heard about how gut health is so important, which is also a relatively newer science, so important to our mental health and to our overall physical health and longevity and to our brain health. Right? It's all interconnected. Well, they have just recently, through a number of studies, and these are ongoing as well, discovered that our mouth, we also have a microbiome there, just like we have a microbiome in our gut that is connected to all of the systems in our body. And so the microbiome in your mouth needs to stay healthy, just like the microbiome in your gut needs to stay healthy. And bad bacteria in your mouth, there are a number of studies showing that bad bacteria in our mouth are potentially linked to a number of diseases as well as cognitive decline potentially. And there are ongoing studies now showing that good oral health is potentially linked to reduced risks of cognitive decline and of a number of chronic diseases that it is possible that our oral health may be directly linked to, right? This is kind of amazing. And what I love about this is that they're really diving in quickly because the evidence is so strong about the microbiome in our gut and our gut health that it makes complete sense that our oral health could be connected to all this too. So we're going to have more and more information on this fairly quickly within the next, 2 or 3 years. But I am telling you, no pun intended here, but my gut is telling me that protecting our oral health on a higher level is one of the keys to longevity and helping to prevent disease. There's also ongoing studies underway right now looking at potential links between oral health and our psychological well-being and even our happiness and anxiety levels. So I think we're going to be getting a wealth of new information on this over the next few years. And you know what? Just upping our oral health right now is, first of all, it's a great habit anyway. It'll protect your teeth in the long run, but I think it's going to have huge benefits. And this is something we don't even really think about. So a couple of the little habits that I do that I've started implementing, first of all, clean your toothbrush. Now, not many of us were taught when we were kids, when we were taught to brush our teeth, we're actually taught to clean our toothbrush and disinfect it. So if you're not doing this because you were never taught, you can start now. I just use rubbing alcohol and I clean my toothbrush every day. And then I rinse it with water, clean water to get the rubbing alcohol off. that I clean my toothbrush to get rid of any negative bacteria that might be there. I also have started brushing 3 times a day when I can. And I work from home. That makes that a little easier. I know if you're in an office or working a job where you're on your feet, it might be a little more difficult, but you could consider taking a toothbrush with you. Because you know what? Not only will it help reduce the bad bacteria and help support the good bacteria in your microbiome in your mouth, but also your mouth will just feel fresher. I noticed, when I started paying more attention to this, if I brush my teeth like after lunch, my mouth just feels better for the afternoon. And not to mention, it'll stave off any bad breath, right? So I've started brushing my teeth 3 times a day when I can, clean toothbrush every day. And here's the other tip. Use a great mouthwash that will kill germs and bacteria in your mouth that are bad. And you want to do a little homework on this because you don't want something so harsh that it's actually killing the good stuff too. And also you don't want something so harsh that it's not necessarily great for your teeth. And also you want to try and avoid artificial flavors, artificial colors, of which there are so many. So it does take a little bit of homework. I recently had a friend recommend to me, and I'm looking into this. I'm probably going to order it and give it a try. One called Tooth and Gums Tonic by Dental Herb Company. And I haven't tried it yet, but apparently it checks all those boxes. So I am going to be ordering some this week. And possibly I'll report back to you here on the show about that. But if you want to just, have a place to start from, you can look that one up. I believe they do carry it on Amazon. In fact, if I end up loving it, I will put it into my Amazon store. So you can keep an eye out for that. And I will link my Amazon store in the show notes. So that is it for today's Joy School Habit. And it's such an easy one that could eventually have amazing payoff. I have a feeling more and more research is going to show how important this is and how directly our oral health is linked to our brain health, possibly helping to prevent dementia, helping to reduce risks in that area, possibly helping to reduce risks in all kinds of other areas of chronic disease. And that is really something to get excited about because when it's so simple to help reduce our risks, then all of those little habits that reduce those risks add up to big payoff. All right, my friends. If you enjoyed this episode of the show, I would be so grateful if you would take just a minute or two to jump over and write a review over on Apple or on any of the podcast platforms where you listen, your favorite platforms. The reviews make a tremendous difference and they help other people who might also be interested in the show to find the show. And I do read them all. And sometimes I even give shout outs to people who leave reviews on the show here. So that is a way that you can help the show. And again, I'm so grateful that you've been here with me today. Thank you so much for joining. And remember, you have the power to create more amazing days. And more amazing days add up to a pretty amazing life. Go out and have a beautiful week, my friends, and I will be back with you soon.